They mocked him for being too quiet, said he had no opinions, no charm, no presence. In the chaos of loud voices and desperate attention seekers, he chose silence. But what they didn't realize was that he was listening, observing, calculating. And when he finally spoke, just once, it changed everything. This is the story of Ion, a boy who mastered the art of being quiet, a boy who turned his silence into a secret weapon. And by the time the world realized what he had become, it was already too late. In the crowded corridors of Redwood High, Ion was barely noticed. He was always there, tucked in a corner, books in hand, eyes lowered, while other students laughed in groups, cracked jokes to impress, or argued to prove a point. Ion remained silent. They mistook his silence for weakness, a mistake they would live to regret. Ion wasn't always like this. There was a time he was loud, so loud that even teachers had to hush him. He used to believe that being heard meant being respected. He tried fitting in, tried being funny, tried being popular. But all he earned was ridicule cloaked in laughter. The friends who cheered for him in daylight mocked him in hushed whispers at night. The turning point came in grade 10, during a group presentation. Ion had poured his soul into the project, prepared the slides, wrote the speech. But when the day came, his group leader, Zion, the school's most admired debater, snatched the credit. Ion wasn't even allowed to speak a word. He stood on that stage, invisible, watching Zion beam under applause. That night, something inside Ion broke, and something else awakened. He stopped speaking unless absolutely necessary. He started listening, not just to words, but to intentions, body language, patterns. He began to understand things others missed. When someone lied, when someone doubted themselves, when someone was pretending to be stronger than they were, his silence wasn't weakness anymore. It became a mirror, and people began to feel uneasy around him, though they couldn't explain why. By the time Ion entered college, he had transformed completely. He walked through campus like a shadow, always present, never loud. Professors admired his discipline. Classmates ignored him at first, until they noticed something strange. Every time there was a debate, he won. Every time there was a problem to solve, he cracked it. But he never showed off, never raised his voice. He let his actions do the talking. Still, some couldn't handle it. Samir, a popular senior, once challenged Ion in front of the entire class during a logic assignment. You're always quiet, but you can't even defend your own ideas. Ion didn't respond. He simply walked to the board, wrote down 3 lines of equations, and left the room. The professor read the board and applauded. Ion had solved the problem even the seniors had failed to crack. Samir never spoke to him again. But success wasn't the only thing that followed Ion's silence. There were darker sides, too. In his 3rd year, a girl named Hiba joined the class. She was loud, confident, and unapologetically bold. She had heard stories about the quiet genius and decided to test him herself. At first, she teased him lightly. "Do you ever speak, or are you secretly mute?" Ion just smiled. Intrigued, she began pushing harder, poking fun at his clothes, making sarcastic remarks, pretending to mimic him. But he remained silent, never reacting. One day, she stood in the canteen and loudly declared, "You know why Ion doesn't talk? Because he knows no one wants to hear him." Everyone laughed, except him. That night, Hiba received a note. No name, no threats, just one sentence written in sharp ink. Silence is not absence, it's patience. She never teased him again. People began to wonder how Ion always managed to stay ahead, how he knew when professors would announce surprise quizzes, how he always predicted what questions would be asked, how he knew which friends were secretly planning betrayal in group projects. They didn't know that Ion had mastered the art of absorbing everything around him. While others spoke without thinking, he listened without interrupting. He noticed details, a twitch in the eyebrow, a hesitation in the voice, a lie hiding behind a smile. He knew who was real and who wasn't. One day, the university announced a high-stakes competition, a national-level business simulation. Hundreds of teams applied. Only 5 were selected. Each team had to build a complete startup idea and pitch it to top investors. The reward? A chance to get funded, mentored, and launched in real life. Ion applied. Alone. People laughed. A one-man startup? He doesn't even talk. How will he pitch it? But the judges didn't laugh. Because when Ion walked onto the stage, he didn't begin with slides. He walked to the podium, looked straight into the audience, and stood silent for exactly 30 seconds. Whispers filled the hall. The judges looked confused. Then Ion began, and every word he spoke was like a knife, sharp, clear, unforgettable. I stayed quiet so I could hear what others miss. I watched how you invest in loud promises and miss silent brilliance. I learned your strategies while you ignored mine. I built a business model while others built noise. He clicked a button. His presentation lit up. Every metric, every graph, every prediction, flawless. He ended with a smile. You never saw me coming. That's the power of being quiet. The audience erupted in applause. Ion won. Not just a competition, but respect. Ion didn't just prove them wrong. He made them rethink everything. The ones who mocked his silence now struggled to be heard. The ones who never noticed him now couldn't take their eyes off him. But what they didn't know was that Ion's silence still had secrets. Secrets that would shake even the loudest voices around him. Because sometimes the quietest person in the room is the one with the most dangerous mind. The room fell into silence again, not because Ion demanded it, but because the weight of his presence required it. His quiet confidence, his unshakable calm, had become something people feared and admired. He didn't beg for attention. He let his results scream. And now, even those who used to laugh behind his back struggled to keep up with his shadow. But success never comes without shadows of envy. Among the competitors in the business simulation was a team led by Zion, the same boy who once stole Ion's voice in high school. Zion didn't recognize him at first. Years had changed Ion's appearance. He had grown taller, leaner, colder. But when Zion finally realized who he was up against, an old fear crept back into his smile. Still the quiet type, huh? Zion said during the press meet, "Let's see if silence can win you everything again." Ion didn't respond. He didn't need to. The scoreboard already did that for him. As weeks passed, Ion's startup model began getting noticed not just by judges, but by real investors. Big names. Silent meetings were scheduled behind closed doors. And Zion? He was left trying to make his voice louder, more aggressive, but the world had started shifting. Now, they listened more to those who thought before speaking. Behind the scenes, Zion grew bitter. He and his team started whispering rumors. That Ion cheated, that he was backed by someone powerful, that no one could be this smart without some inside help. They tried to tarnish his reputation, but their loud accusations had no proof, and Ion never even acknowledged them. His silence infuriated them further. What Zion didn't understand was that Ion's quiet wasn't just strategy anymore. It had become his identity. He had learned to weaponize it. While others wasted time arguing, defending, and shouting for validation, Ion observed and adjusted, constantly 2 steps ahead. One evening, after a long round of elimination pitches, Ion returned to his dorm to find his room door slightly ajar. Inside, his notes were scattered, files tampered with, and his laptop missing. No sign of forced entry. No cameras in the hallway. He said nothing to anyone. The next morning, Zion's team presented a pitch eerily similar to Ion's private prototype. Same structure, same target market, even identical phrasing in some slides. They had stolen it, but they didn't know that Ion had expected it. A week earlier, he had replaced his real data with a decoy. It was a bait. The stolen pitch was flawed, brilliant on the surface, broken at its core. When the judges raised questions Zion couldn't answer, their confidence crumbled in real time. Investors started to doubt. Some even walked out mid-pitch. Later that evening, Zion found a handwritten note slipped under his door. Loud thieves fall first. Quiet minds lay the trap. Ion didn't report the theft. He didn't demand justice. He simply let Zion destroy himself with his own desperation. In the final round of the competition, Ion stood alone on stage once more. This time, he didn't speak for a full minute, just stared at the audience, eyes calm, jaw set. Everyone watched, holding their breath. Then, In a voice barely above a whisper, he said, "You tried to silence me once, but silence became my strength. I listened, I learned, and I built something you can't steal, discipline." He unveiled a fully functioning beta version of his product. Live demo. No slides, just action. It worked flawlessly. By the end of the night, he had 6 offers, all top-tier firms, all willing to back his vision. Zion's team wasn't even mentioned in the final announcement. Back on campus, Ion became a name whispered with awe. Professors started referencing his pitch in lectures. Students tried to mimic his mannerisms, thinking his silence was some sort of magic trick. But what they didn't understand was that silence wasn't the trick. Focus was. People began asking him for interviews, podcasts, speaking events. He declined most. He wasn't interested in talking. He was still building, still observing. But one day, he accepted a request from a small group of underdogs, students who were always overlooked, mocked for their simplicity. He sat with them, not as a mentor, but as a mirror. They asked him, finally, what kept him so quiet all these years. He looked at them for a moment and said, "When you talk less, you learn more. When you learn more, you do better. And when you do better, you don't need to prove anything." One of the students asked, "But don't people take advantage of your silence?" He smiled softly. "Only once. After that, they learn to fear it." Over the month that followed, Ion's startup grew beyond expectations. His product reached international markets. Yet, he remained the same, calm, observant, untouched by noise. People still tried to provoke him. Online haters, envious competitors, click-hungry journalists. But Ion never gave them what they wanted. No outbursts, no defenses, just progress. He didn't need to be the loudest. He just needed to be the last one standing. Years later, when he was invited to speak at an international leadership summit, he walked onto the massive stage, thousands of eyes watching. He stood at the mic, let the silence settle, and then said, "In a world where everyone's screaming for attention, be the one who builds in silence. Let your work echo louder than your words." The room erupted in applause, not for the man who spoke, but for the man who mastered the art of not speaking unless it truly mattered. Success isn't always loud. In fact, the loudest often burn out first. It's the quiet builders, the silent learners, the ones who observe and act, that rewrite the rules. Ion never shouted for the world to notice him. He simply made himself impossible to ignore. So the next time someone underestimates your silence, let them, because when your moment comes, they won't hear you coming, but they will never forget your arrival.